A millionaire's car stopped in the middle of nowhere. No phone signal, no help, and night falling fast. But then, a tiny barefoot girl walked up to him. And that moment, that one act of kindness, rewrote his entire life. Smith's white luxury car glided smoothly through the quiet suburban street, its headlights cutting a gentle path through the fading evening light. The air outside was calm, but inside his mind, there was noise. Numbers danced in his head. Deadlines chased him. Contracts, meetings, profits. That's all his world had become. He was the kind of man who had everything money could buy, yet felt a strange emptiness money could never fill. His hands rested on the steering wheel, perfectly manicured, the watch on his wrist shining like his success story. But that same success had taken away something precious. His peace. He hadn't smiled from his heart in years. His life was a list of achievements, but none of them gave him warmth. As his car rolled past the quiet houses, he noticed families sitting on porches, parents laughing with their kids, neighbors chatting casually. Smith looked away. Those simple moments were foreign to him, too ordinary for a man who built empires. Yet somewhere deep inside, a small part of him missed that kind of life, a life where people mattered more than money. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with orange and pink. He adjusted his tie, leaned back and sighed. Another long day, another lonely drive. His assistant had already sent him tomorrow's schedule. 3 meetings, 2 lunches, 1 charity dinner he didn't care about. Every minute of his day was planned, but none of it had meaning. He glanced at the photo tucked inside his wallet. His parents, smiling from years ago. They had passed away before seeing what he became. They had taught him to be kind, but somewhere along the way, he forgot that lesson in his race to the top. The hum of the engine was the only sound that kept him company. The street grew quieter, the houses fewer. He rolled down the window slightly. The cool air brushed his face. It felt strange, almost comforting after being trapped all day in glass offices and luxury halls. Then something tugged at his heart, a small sound in the distance. Laughter. The kind of innocent laughter that reminded him of his childhood. He turned his head and saw a little girl skipping outside a small house, holding a tiny flashlight, chasing her shadow. He smiled faintly, just for a second, before his phone buzzed again, dragging him back to reality. "Mr. Smith, the deal's confirmed," read the message. He typed a quick, "good job," and placed the phone aside. Business never stopped, not even for a moment. But tonight felt different, too quiet, too peaceful for a man who thrived on chaos. As he drove deeper into the neighborhood, the streetlights flickered to life, one by one. He noticed how still everything seemed. No honking cars, no rush, just calm. It made him uneasy. He wasn't used to calm. He pressed the accelerator slightly, wanting to get back to the city, to the noise he called normal. But fate had other plans. His car made a strange clicking sound. Once, then twice. He frowned, checking his dashboard. Everything looked fine, until the next second. The engine coughed, the lights dimmed. The car slowed down, then stopped completely. For the first time in years, Smith felt something unfamiliar. Helplessness. He was a man who could buy anything, fix anything, but at that moment, he couldn't move a single inch forward. The street was silent again. The only sound was the faint echo of a child's laughter fading into the distance, and the quiet heartbeat of fate beginning to change his life forever. The silence of the street deepened as Smith's car suddenly jolted. A strange metallic click echoed through the air, followed by a long, uncomfortable hiss. He frowned and glanced at the dashboard. Everything looked normal for a second, then the lights began to flicker like a dying candle. The steering wheel stiffened in his hands. The car rolled forward a few more feet before coming to a complete stop. Smith pressed the accelerator. Nothing, not even a whisper from the engine. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, twisting the key again. The car responded with a low grinding noise, then silence. He tried once more, and again, his patience thinning with each failed attempt. He exhaled sharply, leaned back, and rubbed his forehead. The stillness outside was unsettling. It wasn't the kind of street he wanted to get stuck on. Too quiet, too empty, too forgotten. Reluctantly, he opened the door and stepped out. The cool evening air hit his face, carrying the faint smell of trees and dust. He loosened his tie and stared at his car, as if glaring alone could bring it back to life. Smith walked to the front and popped open the hood. A puff of warm air escaped, followed by the faint smell of burnt oil. He looked inside. Wires, metal, confusion. He wasn't the kind of man who fixed things with his hands. He paid people to do that. He took out his phone, confident that help was just a call away. But when the screen lit up, his heart sank. No signal. No bars, no connection, no lifeline. A strange sinking feeling washed over him. He raised the phone higher, took a few steps down the street, but the result was the same: emptiness. The city's strong network seemed miles away from this forgotten neighborhood. He walked back to the car, the sound of his shoes echoing faintly on the pavement. The sun had almost set now, painting the sky a deep orange before slipping into gray. Streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, casting long shadows that stretched across the road like silent watchers. For the first time in a long while, Smith realized how much he depended on control, his schedule, his money, his plans. And now, for the first time, none of it mattered. He couldn't buy a signal. He couldn't restart the car. He couldn't even call his driver. The world felt unusually quiet, so quiet it almost hummed. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the soft chirp of a cricket hidden somewhere in the dark. Each sound reminded him how alone he was. He sat on the edge of his car, staring at the empty street. Luxury had always surrounded him, but tonight, all that comfort felt useless. The street light above him buzzed weakly, throwing a pale light across his sky-blue suit. It made him look more human, less like the polished businessman he always pretended to be. Minutes stretched into half an hour. No cars passed by. No one walked the street. Just the whisper of wind and the beating of his own anxious heart. He leaned his head back, staring at the stars starting to appear. They were beautiful, far, untouchable, and silent, just like the life he lived. Smith didn't know it yet, but in that still moment of isolation, his world was quietly shifting. Because just a few houses away, through a small window framed with yellow curtains, a pair of curious blue eyes were watching him, with wonder, innocence, and compassion. And that little girl was about to change his life forever. In a quiet corner of the neighborhood stood a small wooden house with a flickering porch light. Inside, behind thin cream-colored curtains, a pair of tiny blue eyes peeked curiously through the window. Those eyes belonged to Victoria, a 5-year-old girl with soft curls of golden hair that shimmered under the light of a single lamp. Her world was small, a world of crayons, bedtime stories, and the comforting hum of her mother's voice in the kitchen. But her heart was big, far too big for her little frame. While most children at that hour were cuddled with toys or watching cartoons, Victoria's gaze was fixed on the strange man outside. He was tall, dressed neatly in a sky-blue suit that looked far too fancy for their simple neighborhood. His white car stood still, its headlights dimmed, the hood open like a wounded bird. Victoria tilted her head, curious. "What's he doing?" she whispered softly to herself, her breath fogging the glass. The man looked sad, not angry, not scared, just deeply, quietly worried. Children have a special kind of intuition, a way of seeing hearts, not just faces. And in that moment, Victoria could sense that this man wasn't just a stranger with a broken car. He looked lonely. She pressed her tiny palms against the cold glass, watching him pace back and forth. He tried his phone again and again, then sighed heavily, his shoulders dropping like someone who had carried too much for too long. Even at 5, Victoria recognized that look. It was the same one her mother sometimes wore when bills piled up or when dinner was just soup again. Her heart squeezed gently inside her chest. Without thinking, she whispered, "He needs help." Behind her, the clock ticked softly. The kitchen light spilled into the small living room where her mother was humming while stirring something on the stove. The smell of soup filled the air, warm, comforting, humble. But Victoria's eyes never left the man. She imagined what it would feel like to be stuck outside alone. It was getting darker now, and the street was empty except for his car. Even the crickets had grown quiet, as if holding their breath. She leaned closer to the window and saw him sit down on the edge of his car. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. She didn't know his name, but she felt like she was supposed to do something. Victoria had always been the kind of girl who believed that every problem could be fixed with kindness. Her teacher often said she had a heart that shines. Right now, that heart was whispering to her, "Go help him." Her little fingers brushed the curtain aside again, making sure he was still there. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking up at the sky as if searching for answers. That single gesture, that quiet moment of defeat, made her decision clear. She turned quickly and ran toward the kitchen. Her small feet made soft tapping sounds against the wooden floor. "Mama," she called out, tugging at her mother's apron. "There's a man outside. His car broke. He looks sad." Her mother paused, spoon midair, her brows furrowing. "A man? What man, sweetheart?" "The one in the blue suit. He's sitting by his car. I think he needs help." Her mother smiled faintly, trying to brush it off. "I'm sure he'll be fine, honey. Maybe he's just waiting for someone." But Victoria shook her head, her curls bouncing. "No, Mama. He looks lost." There was something about the way she said it, soft but certain, that made her mother glance out the window. And there he was, the stranger, sitting alone under the streetlight, his hands clasped, eyes distant. Her mother sighed, unsure. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups don't want help." But Victoria, with all the innocence of a child, replied quietly, "Then maybe that's why they need it most." Her mother looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same goodness that used to live in her own heart before life got hard. She brushed a strand of hair from Victoria's face and whispered, "You're just like your father." Victoria didn't fully understand what that meant, but it made her smile. She turned back toward the window. The man was still there, motionless, a shadow against the pale light. And in that tiny, quiet house, a 5-year-old girl made a decision that would ripple through her life and his forever. She would help him. Not because he was rich, not because he looked important, but because her heart told her to. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change 2 lives forever. Victoria stood by the window for one last moment, watching the man with quiet determination in her eyes. Her small reflection looked back at her, a little girl with a brave heart, clutching the edge of her faded pink sweater. Behind her, the kitchen was warm and golden, filled with the gentle clinking of dishes and the soft bubbling of soup. Her mother stirred the pot, unaware that her daughter's tiny heart was already making a big decision. "Mama," Victoria whispered again, walking closer, "that man outside looks really sad." Her mother glanced toward the window, her tired eyes catching sight of the white car and the man beside it. She sighed softly. "Sweetheart, he's probably okay. Maybe his car just stopped for a while." But Victoria didn't believe that. She could feel it, the kind of feeling that only children understand. "He's sitting alone, Mama. It's dark out. What if no one comes for him?" Her voice trembled slightly, full of concern rather than fear. Her mother tried to smile. "Sometimes people just need time to fix things on their own." But Victoria, with her innocent honesty, replied quietly, "Sometimes they need someone to ask if they're okay." The room fell silent. Even the spoon her mother was holding stopped mid-stir. Those words, so simple, so pure, seemed to echo through the quiet house. Her mother looked at her little girl and realized she was learning from her far more than she had ever taught her. Before her mother could say anything more, Victoria slipped her tiny feet into her shoes. The laces were loose, and her sweater sleeves hung past her hands, but her steps were full of courage. "Victoria, wait!" her mother called out, but the door had already creaked open. A cool breeze swept into the house, carrying the scent of the night, fresh, still, and full of mystery. The street outside looked bigger and quieter than it ever had before. The soft glow of the streetlight touched Victoria's curls as she stepped onto the pavement. Her heart thumped inside her chest, not with fear but with determination. She looked toward the man sitting by his car. His head bowed, his shoulders heavy with thoughts she couldn't understand. But she didn't need to understand them. She just knew he looked like someone who needed a friend. The distance between them felt longer than it really was. Her tiny shoes tapped softly against the ground as she walked closer, her shadow stretching under the light. Smith didn't notice her at first. lost in his own world of broken plans and fading patience. Then he heard it, the sound of small footsteps approaching. He looked up, confused, and saw her, a little girl, no taller than his knee, standing just a few feet away. She clutched the edge of her sweater and looked at him with wide, gentle eyes that sparkled under the dim light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was filled with quiet curiosity, a stranger's weariness meeting a child's kindness. "Hi," she said softly, her voice sweet but sure. Smith blinked, surprised. "Oh, hello there. Your car's broken?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think it is. And my phone's not working either." She nodded as if she understood every word. "My mama says sometimes things stop working when they're tired." Smith couldn't help but chuckle, a sound that had been missing from his voice for weeks. "You might be right," he said gently. "Maybe it's just tired." Victoria took a small step closer. "You can come to our house. Mama makes soup. It helps when people are tired too." Smith stared at her, startled by the offer. In his world of boardrooms and business suits, people didn't offer help like that, not without asking for something in return. But this child, she was offering warmth without expecting a thing. He glanced toward her small house, the one with the dim light and peeling paint. He hesitated, unsure if he should say yes. He didn't want to intrude. But when he looked back at her, something in her innocent eyes made his heart soften. "That's very kind of you," he said quietly, "but I don't want to trouble your family." "It's not trouble," she said, her little face serious now. "It's helping." And with that, she reached out her tiny hand. For a moment, Smith just looked at it. Small, delicate, but full of something powerful. Kindness. Then slowly he took it. Her hand was warm against his cold fingers. It felt like holding on to hope. Together they began walking toward her house. A millionaire and a little girl. Two people from different worlds, joined by a simple act of kindness. Inside, the lights of the small home glowed like a soft promise. Unaware that this small moment, this brave step, was about to change everything for both of them. Smith looked up, startled, as a small beam of light flickered toward him. The darkness around his car softened, and through it came the faint shuffle of tiny footsteps. A child's voice, gentle yet brave, broke the silence. "Sir, are you okay?" The words felt strange to him, simple, caring, human. He turned and saw her, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, barefoot on the cool pavement, holding a small flashlight that trembled slightly in her hand. Her hair glowed like gold under the dim streetlight, and her blue eyes held no fear, only concern. For a moment, Smith forgot about his car, his meetings, his deadlines. He just stared, surprised, touched, unsure what to say. He managed a small smile. "My car's not working," he said softly. "But I'll manage, thank you." Victoria's little nose wrinkled in thought. "You don't look like you're managing," she said honestly. The innocence in her voice made him chuckle despite himself. He stood up straight, brushing dust off his sky-blue suit. The evening wind ruffled his hair. He felt awkward, a 35-year-old millionaire standing beside a broken car being comforted by a barefoot child. It was almost humbling. Victoria lifted her flashlight toward his face, squinting. "You look tired," she said. "I guess I am," he replied. "It's been a long day." "Then you should rest," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Her little hand pointed toward a small house at the end of the street. "You can come to my house. Mama and I live just there. It's warm inside." Smith blinked, caught off guard. "Your house?" She nodded eagerly. "Yes. Mama makes soup. She says soup makes people feel better. You should try." He wanted to laugh, but the truth was, the idea of warmth and soup sounded better than another cold hour in silence. Still, he hesitated. His world had rules, unspoken boundaries about who to trust, where to go, how to act. He had spent years surrounded by luxury, by people who only cared for his money or his name. But this child was different. She didn't know who he was. She didn't care. She was offering something money could never buy. Kindness. Smith looked down the street again, dark, empty, lonely. The nearest house lights flickered faintly in the distance. There were no taxis, no cars, no passing strangers, just him and this little girl who had somehow found him. He sighed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're very sweet," he said gently, "but I don't want to bother your family." "It's not a bother," Victoria said, her voice full of determination. "Mama says helping people is what good hearts do, and I think you have a good heart, too." Her words hit him unexpectedly, like a soft hand pressing against an old wound. When was the last time anyone had told him he had a good heart? He couldn't remember. Maybe never. The flashlight beam wobbled as she waited for him to decide. He glanced again at his car, the symbol of his success now useless. And then back at her, the symbol of something he'd long forgotten. Innocence. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said with a small smile. "I'll come." Her face lit up instantly, pure joy, simple and unfiltered. "Yay, come on, it's this way," she said, motioning with her tiny hand. As they began walking together, Smith noticed how small her steps were compared to his. She walked barefoot over the cold ground without complaint, humming softly as if leading a friend home. The air around them seemed to change, less lonely, more alive. He glanced down at her. "You're very brave," he said. She smiled. "Mama says brave people don't wear capes, they just care." He didn't respond, but something inside him stirred. Something quiet, almost forgotten. Care. That word felt foreign to him, yet hearing it from her made it sound like truth. As they reached the small house, warm light spilled out from the window, painting the porch in gold. It was modest, but it felt alive, like a safe harbor at the end of a long storm. Victoria turned to him, smiling proudly. "See? I told you it's warm inside." Smith nodded slowly, his heart unexpectedly heavy with emotion. He hadn't felt home in a very long time, but for some reason, standing there on that worn-out porch, he felt closer to it than ever before. He didn't know it yet, but that small step toward her door was also a step toward something far greater. A lesson, a bond, and a love that would reshape his heart forever. The little house stood at the end of the street like a soft light in the darkness, small, simple, and alive. Its paint had faded, its porch creaked with every step, but it carried a warmth that no mansion ever could. Smith followed Victoria up the narrow path, his polished shoes brushing against fallen leaves, his heart unsure what to expect. When she reached the door, Victoria turned back and smiled up at him. "See? I told you it's warm here," she whispered proudly, as if she were showing him a castle. Smith couldn't help but smile, not because of the house, but because of her faith. The front door opened before he could knock. A woman stood there, mid-30s, wearing a simple cardigan, her face kind but cautious. Her eyes widened when she saw the stranger behind her daughter, a tall man in a sky-blue suit, looking far too elegant for their humble doorstep. "Victoria," she said slowly, her voice filled with confusion. "Who is this?" Before Smith could speak, the little girl answered cheerfully, "Mama, this is Mr. She looked up at him, realizing she didn't know his name. "Smith," he said gently, offering a polite smile. "My name's Smith. My car broke down just down the street. I'm sorry for the trouble. Your daughter was kind enough to offer help." Her mother blinked, taken aback by his politeness. "Oh, I see." She looked past him toward the dark street, where the broken car's headlights still glowed faintly. Her instincts urged caution. A stranger was a stranger, no matter how polite or well-dressed. But then she looked down at Victoria, who was holding her flashlight like a trophy, her face glowing with pride. "Mama, he was all alone," she said softly. "He looked sad." Something in those words, simple, honest, full of love, made the woman's shoulders relax just a little. She stepped aside and opened the door wider. "You can sit for a while, Mr. Smith." "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I really appreciate your kindness." As he stepped inside, the smell of warm soup greeted him, a humble scent, rich with comfort. The house was small, 2 rooms, a narrow hallway, and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. Old furniture filled the living room, a wooden table with a few scratches, a small couch with fading fabric, and a photo frame on the wall that held memories of better days. Yet the air inside carried something his luxurious penthouse never did: peace. It was as if the walls themselves held love. Smith sat on the small couch, feeling oddly out of place. His expensive suit, polished shoes, and gold watch looked almost ridiculous here. But instead of judgment, the woman's eyes held quiet understanding. "I'll get you some water," she said politely, walking toward the kitchen. Victoria climbed up on a chair beside him, swinging her legs and watching him curiously. "You have shiny shoes," she said suddenly. "Do they make you walk faster?" He chuckled softly. "Not really, just cleaner." She giggled. "Mama says clean doesn't always mean better." Smith nodded thoughtfully. "Your mama's very wise." When her mother returned with a glass of water, he stood up slightly to take it. "Thank you," he said, his tone respectful. "You have a lovely home." She smiled faintly, a little embarrassed, a little proud. "It's small," she said, "but it's ours." Smith looked around again. There was a quiet dignity in everything: the worn-out curtains, the flickering lamp, the soft hum of the stove in the background. He thought about his own home. Rooms too big to feel real, silence that echoed off marble floors. He had never realized how cold wealth could be until he sat in this tiny living room filled with warmth. Victoria's mother glanced at his car keys on the table. "It must have been scary being stuck out there," she said gently. He shook his head. "Not scary, just lonely." She nodded slowly. "That's worse sometimes." The room fell quiet for a moment, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Victoria hummed softly to herself, playing with the edge of the tablecloth while Smith sipped his water, his gaze softening. He didn't know what surprised him more, that he felt comfortable here or that he didn't want to leave. For the first time in years, someone had opened their door for him, not because of his money, but because of kindness. No contracts, no expectations, just warmth. And as he watched Victoria lean her head against her mother's arm, smiling sleepily, something deep inside him shifted, a quiet, tender ache he hadn't felt in years. He realized that sometimes the most beautiful places aren't the ones filled with gold and art, but the ones where hearts still know how to care. The little dining table was old, one leg slightly wobbly, a few scratches marking its surface, but to Smith it looked more inviting than any polished glass table he'd ever sat at. Victoria's mother placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of him, the aroma rich and comforting, filling the small room with warmth. Beside it, she set a plate with a few slices of bread, toasted just enough to be golden. Smith stared at it for a moment, unsure what to say. He was used to gourmet meals, silver cutlery, and waiters who bowed before serving him. But here, in this modest home, a simple bowl of soup felt like a feast. "Please," Victoria's mother said quietly. "It's not much, but it's warm." Her voice carried both humility and pride, the tone of someone who'd learned to make the best of what she had. Smith hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice carrying genuine gratitude. He picked up the spoon, the steam brushing against his face as he took the first sip. It was simple, but it was real. No fancy flavors, no expensive ingredients, just warmth, honesty, and care. He closed his eyes for a second. It had been years since food had tasted like comfort. Victoria grinned from across the table. "Mama makes the best soup," she said proudly. Her mother chuckled. "Only because you always help me stir it, sweetheart." The little girl smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Then it's our soup." Smith couldn't help but laugh. A genuine, soft laugh that surprised even him. The sound filled the small room, and for the first time that night, he didn't feel like a stranger. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Small things at first. Victoria talked about her school, how she liked drawing, and how her teacher said she had a big imagination. Smith listened, smiling as she spoke, nodding like someone who hadn't truly listened to another soul in years. Then, as the laughter faded into quiet, Smith glanced toward the mother. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes carried the weight of quiet struggles, exhaustion hidden behind grace. "You and Victoria live here alone?" he asked softly. She nodded, her fingers tightening around her spoon. Yes, it's just us. There was a pause, a long, delicate silence that filled the air like a sigh. Victoria looked down at her soup, stirring it slowly. Mama says Papa lives in heaven now, she whispered. Smith froze, his heart catching. Her mother placed a hand on the girl's shoulder gently. It's been 3 years, she said, her voice calm but heavy. He was a good man, kind, brave. Her words lingered in the air, simple, yet full of pain that time hadn't erased. Smith lowered his gaze, his chest tightening. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You've both been through a lot. The woman smiled faintly, shaking her head. Life doesn't ask before taking, Mr. Smith, but it still gives in its own ways. Victoria nodded softly, trying to smile. Mama says even when bad things happen, good things come after. You just have to wait. Smith looked at her, this tiny girl who had already learned what patience meant. Her hope felt bigger than the room itself. He thought about his own life, the meetings, the endless phone calls, the applause that never felt real. He had everything money could buy, but sitting there in that little kitchen, he realized how little he truly owned. Not love, not laughter, not moments like this. Victoria tore a small piece of bread and handed it to him. You should eat more, she said sweetly. You look hungry. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Thank you, Victoria. I think I am. As he took another spoonful, a quiet peace settled in the room. Outside, the world carried on, cars passing, lights blinking in the distance. But inside this humble home, time seemed to slow down. The warmth of the soup, the sound of soft voices, the kindness of strangers, all of it worked together to melt something cold inside him. He felt small, human, and alive. When the meal was done, Victoria's mother began to clear the table. Thank you, he said again, standing up. This was the best dinner I've had in a long time. She smiled gently. It's just soup. No, he replied quietly. It's kindness. And that's rare. Their eyes met for a moment, a look of quiet understanding, two lives from different worlds meeting halfway. Victoria yawned and leaned against her mother's arm, her small eyes fluttering with sleep. Smith watched her, the way she clung to her mother, safe and loved, and a deep ache filled his chest. He had spent years surrounded by people, yet no one had ever made him feel this kind of peace. That night, over a simple bowl of soup, something invisible changed. Not just for him, but for all three of them. Because sometimes it isn't grand events that change lives. It's the quiet dinners, the soft smiles, the warmth of a stranger's home that reminds a lonely man what it means to have a heart. The small house had grown even warmer as the night deepened. The soft crackle of the fireplace filled the air, the flames dancing in shades of orange and gold. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside, everything felt still, calm, safe, and peaceful. Smith sat near the old fireplace on a simple wooden chair, his sky-blue suit jacket folded neatly on the armrest. He looked around the cozy room, a few shelves of books, some crayons scattered on the floor, and tiny shoes by the door. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fancy, but it felt alive. Victoria sat cross-legged on the rug in front of him, showing him her world, her crayons, her paper drawings, and her little box of treasures. Look, she said proudly, holding up a picture she'd drawn of her and her mama holding hands under a bright sun. Smith leaned forward, smiling. That's beautiful, he said softly. You're really talented. She grinned, her cheeks pink with joy. I like to draw happy things, she said. He nodded. That's a good thing to draw. The world needs more of that. She handed him another drawing, this one of a house with a garden and a big tree. This one's for you, she said shyly. You can keep it. He hesitated for a moment, surprised, then took it gently. Thank you, he said. I'll keep it safe. Her laughter filled the room, light, musical, full of innocence. It echoed softly against the walls, blending with the crackle of the fire. And for the first time in years, Smith didn't think about meetings or deadlines. He didn't think about the world waiting for him outside. He just felt. Her mother watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, a faint smile on her face. She hadn't seen her daughter so happy in a while, and she hadn't seen a man look so peaceful in even longer. Victoria picked up a small teddy bear, its fur a little worn from love. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said seriously. "He listens when I talk." Smith smiled. "That's a very good bear, then." "Do you have one?" she asked. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No. I think I stopped talking to bears a long time ago." Victoria frowned thoughtfully. "That's why you looked sad." Her words caught him off guard. "Sad?" he repeated. She nodded. "People who don't talk to anyone get sad inside. You should talk to Mr. Buttons, too." Smith didn't know what to say. Her innocence, her way of seeing truth without judgment, touched something deep inside him. He reached out and patted the teddy bear gently. "Hello, Mr. Buttons," he said softly, smiling. Victoria giggled so hard she almost fell over. "See? He likes you already." The room filled with laughter again, real, joyful, and alive. For years, Smith's nights had been silent, just him and the echo of his own thoughts in a massive, empty mansion. He had walls covered in art, floors made of marble, and chandeliers worth more than most people's homes. But none of it had ever made him feel this. As the night grew late, the fire burned lower. Victoria leaned sleepily against her mother's lap, her eyelids heavy but her smile still bright. Smith watched her, his heart full and aching all at once. When he finally stood up to leave, she jumped from her seat, running to him. "Wait," she said, stretching out her tiny arms. He bent down, smiling. "What is it, little one?" She wrapped her arms around his neck, a small, warm hug full of pure love. "Don't be sad, mister," she whispered. "Everything gets better when you smile." Smith froze for a moment, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a lump in his throat, a sting behind his eyes. He hugged her back, his voice soft and shaky. "Thank you, Victoria. I'll remember that." Her mother stood by the door, watching quietly. Something about the way Smith held her daughter, gentle, respectful, grateful, told her this man wasn't like the others she'd seen in life. He was broken in places that only kindness could reach. As he stepped outside, the night air felt different. Cooler, yes, but lighter somehow, as if even the darkness had softened. He turned once more toward the little house, its windows glowing softly in the dark. It looked small against the vast sky, yet it held something his mansion never had. Love. He glanced at the drawing still in his hand, the one Victoria had given him, and smiled. A house, a garden, and two smiling faces. He folded it carefully and placed it inside his coat pocket, close to his heart. As he walked toward his car, he realized that tonight wasn't just about a broken engine. It was about a broken soul that had found warmth again. In a house filled with laughter, soup, and a little girl's innocent kindness. And as he looked up at the stars, he whispered softly, "Maybe everything does get better when you smile." The next morning, a mechanic fixed Smith's car. But he didn't drive away immediately. He spoke to Victoria's mother, his eyes filled with emotion. "You both gave me something money can't buy. Kindness," he said. "I want to help you and be part of your lives." At first, her mother refused. "We can't accept this, sir. We're fine." But Smith insisted gently, "Please, let me do something good, for once, from my heart." Weeks later, Smith kept visiting them. Slowly, trust grew. He helped Victoria's mother find a better job and supported Victoria's education. One day, he asked softly, "Can I be part of your family?" Her mother hesitated at first, but when she saw how Victoria's eyes sparkled every time she saw Smith, she finally said yes. From that day, Smith was no longer just a millionaire. He became a father, a friend, and a man who learned that real wealth isn't in money, but in love. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can open the biggest doors in life. A little girl's heart reminded a millionaire that humanity, not money, is the real treasure.